With the changes in the planet, the way things are going at the moment, there's going to be a lot of opportunity for people to be working for themselves. What we find is that generally the person who's got the problem is the best person to solve it, because they know all the reasons why your solution won't work. We talk about leadership and we call it leading yourself and leading others, because you really are leading yourself. And it might be at work, but it's also in the family. You use these skills all the time, totally transferable. Not everybody is open to learning more about themselves, because sometimes when we learn more about ourselves, we actually don't like what we see.
Hello, beautiful questers, and a warm welcome to the One Quest podcast. We are absolutely delighted to have you with us on this journey of learning and self-discovery.
Our guests are not just mentors in wellness and self-improvement, they are adventurers at heart, sharing their unique paths and life lessons.
If you enjoy our show, please subscribe and share. Your support enables us to feature more amazing guests and deliver impactful conversations. Please note that some episodes may cover sensitive topics like abuse, mental health struggles, and personal challenges. Welcome to our Infinite Potential podcast. Today we have the pleasure in speaking with Shirley Dalton. Shirley's the creator of the Blueprint for Business Freedom and an internationally certified results coach. With decades of experience in leadership systems and mindset, Shirley has helped thousands of leaders and business owners achieve lasting results. Formerly the COO of a global franchise, she scaled the business from 200 to 550 clients and helped it list on the ASX, driven by her ability to align people, processes, and possibility. Her work continues to empower others to lead with clarity, confidence, and purpose. So wonderful to have you with us, Shirley, and I'm really excited to explore some of your fascinating work around effective leadership.
Yes, thanks, Catherine. Thanks, Steph. It's nice to be here.
Amazing. Now, you describe yourself as a results coach. For those who maybe aren't familiar with that term, can you share what that means and how it differs from other kind of coaching approaches?
Yeah, we focus on the result that the client wants to get, and we usually do that in sprints. So it might be an 8 or a 10-week focus, and this is the result that I want to get. And then we absolutely focus on that. And I use both traditional and dynamic coaching processes. So traditional coaching is really asking quality questions. How come you did that? What's the result of this? And then the dynamic is really some closed eye processes that we have. We are able to help people to release their internal limitations. And that could be limiting beliefs, trapped emotions, or conflicted values.
Wow, it's absolutely fascinating. And you've got 5 steps to become an effective leader. That sounds like a fascinating process. I'm really interested to hear more about that too.
Yes, so I originally came up with the Blueprint for Business Freedom, which actually has the 3 areas: people, process, and possibility. And when I first started my business, I was concentrating on helping small business owners to streamline and systemize their business, which started out as processes. And then what I found was when the project finished and I'd walk away, the systems would fall over, and I'd be scratching my head like, how come? We've agreed on all of this. And then I realized that the owners and leaders didn't know how to lead and manage their people. And so then that became the people side of things, where I was helping them to understand themselves, to understand their people, and to have good communication skills. I'm an accredited instructor for Thomas Gordon's leader effectiveness training. And also I spent, many years training in the leadership myself. And then as I grew more, it became apparent that, yes, we've got the people skills now, we've got the process skills, but we also need what I called originally possibilities, which is really potential, and that's the mindset. And we sort of bring a little bit of woo-woo stuff in there around manifestation and creation, and then look at releasing all of the obstacles. And so the 5 steps to become an effective leader is I've taken the 5 parts that are really important for people that they need in order to step into this role of leadership, and that is to lead yourself. We have to know and understand ourselves. So we have to be able to lead ourselves. We have to be able to lead others. As you know, it's one thing to know yourself, but you've got to know your team. Not everybody likes to be appreciated the same way. You don't speak the same way to to everybody. You've got to really understand where they're coming from. And one of my favorite quotes is by John Maxwell, who says leadership is about becoming the type of person others trust to take them where they want to go. And so you've got to know where your people want to go. Then you've also got to be able to have what we call the language of leadership, and that is the communication skills, how to say things that land better for people. And so that takes us the three sections out of our people side of the blueprint for business freedom. And then we step over into the potential, the possibility side. And then we look at what it means to have a leadership mindset, because it really is a different way of looking at things. As a leader, you're always influencing. And you've got to really understand that. And, you can't be in on the gossip anymore. You can't be in on the jokes. And then the last thing, number 5, is to get some support for success. So all successful people, all successful athletes have somebody in their corner who is supporting them, coaching them or mentoring them. And so that's the last piece of the puzzle.
That's great. And obviously with a business or a client of yours, it's probably a one-on-one type of program or one with many, but it's under the same business umbrella. Do you also do programs outside of that format where you educate larger groups or hold any online classes or training for groups of people?
Yes. One of my things, Steph, is that I was born to teach. And I know, like in numerology, I'm a number 7, which is the student and the teacher. And so all of the above. So I started out doing one-on-one coaching. Yeah. And then we started offering groups. So we have one coming up in July. It's my signature program called Leading Yourself and Leading Others. And it's 4 workshop days, but it's really intense. And we've been running that for over 15 years now. And then I'll also do training for other companies if they might invite me in. I was working with one company yesterday. They're an allied health company. And so they provide these opportunities for their leaders. And we just go in once a month and focus on a topic. So, yeah, love it.
And do you feel like one format has better results than the other? The one where you're more actively involved one-on-one with a business compared to people in an online program? Do you see a difference there?
When COVID happened, and we were in Tasmania at the time, we were living and working in a motorhome for a couple of years. And so we were, I say stuck, but it wasn't really stuck down in Tasmania. But I was due to come back and run a face-to-face leadership experience. And of course we couldn't. And so that was the first time we pivoted and did the leadership experience online. And a few of the people were quite skeptical. I think I was a little bit at the time, and yet it worked really well. So personally, I still have a preference for face-to-face because I love that interaction and that energy, and I can walk around and whack someone on the head if they're saying the wrong thing, which I can't do through the Zoom. But overall, I'm part of a group myself, and they will have the day before I was on a training course with them, and they have 450 people on Zoom from around the world. So it just depends. Yeah, it's amazing. Depends on how you structure it.
And you mentioned in one of those sort of first pillars around self-awareness, and that's really one of the cornerstones to effective leadership. How do you feel that cultivating self-awareness contributes, like both personally but also professionally? Because I can imagine that the more connected you are to what drives you and what like who you are and what you want in life, can really then help transform the workplace too.
Absolutely. And we have a profile that we use, and it's not, we have a personality profile that we use as well, but this particular one helps us to measure the different attributes of people, and one of them actually is self-awareness. So we can get a score from 1 to 10 on self-awareness. The lower the score and the less self-awareness people have, is that these people will be saying, "Can you smell that? Can you smell it? Something's burning. God, something's burning." And then they look around and they're not even aware that it's their backside that's the one on fire. And so, Yeah. So when you do get the feedback and you do become aware, because often, the self-awareness is two parts. Like there's the reflection of, gee, I said that, and I noticed that the person's reaction was like, whoa. So, maybe I need to look at what I've just said. Or sometimes we get the self-awareness through the feedback that other people give us, and it's like, and you go, oh, wow, thanks for that. But when you do have it, then you can manage yourself better and you can understand how you show up for people. I'll give you an example. When I'm doing some systems work with people and I'm really concentrating on what they're saying, I'm aware that my face gets like this really ugly, horrible look on its face. And
Very
people are thinking
focused.
like, yeah, exactly. And people think, oh my God, we've said the wrong thing. She's cranky. She doesn't approve. So I tell them that up front. And I said, look, if I'm frowning and that it's because the cogs are working and, my little neurons there are working overtime. And in fact, I have one client who we do a lot of work on the phone and he'll say to me, Shirley, are you frowning? And I'll say, yes, Lee, I'm frowning. He goes, oh, good.
Oh, I love that.
Very good.
How do you even begin to start cultivating that more? Like, what are there steps that people can take to start being more self-aware and really sort of see how their behavior is affecting others? Like, are there any kind of personal practices that you can do to sort of really help, turn that dial up and have you feel, more connected to what's going on?
Yes, and the first thing, Catherine, is to be open to it. So not everybody is open to learning more about themselves, because sometimes when we learn more about ourselves, we actually don't like what we see. And in fact, I was coaching one chap and, out of a 10-week program, he just fought with me for 8 weeks. It was just a battle. And, all I got was a bloody forehead at the end of it. And then his wife said to him one night, look, I don't know if she's right or she's wrong. All I know is she's in your head. And anyway, and then he came back the next week and he said, this coaching, he said, I thought was rubbish, because I thought, we're not talking about profit and loss. We're not talking about productivity. All you're talking about is me. And then the penny dropped and he went, oh, the better I am, the better, my relationships will be, the better the company will be. So then he became open to learning more about himself, because a lot of people, they don't want to know. And so that's one tip there, is to be able to be open to it, because when you are, you can ask people, and also to start noticing the body language of people when you're interacting with them. Are they leaning in towards you? Are they moving away from you? Are they shocked? Just to notice those sorts of things.
And what sort of clients would you, for businesses, even the group sessions that you're working with, do they range from, $200,000 top line turnover all the way up to $10 million? Like, is there a kind of entry point for you where your prices are, seeing more of the, 1 mil plus sort of clients? What are you seeing with your clients?
I think, Steph, the real determiner is the level of comfort that people have with investing in themselves and in their team. So it's not so much what the turnover, the revenue, or the profit is for the company. It's the mindset of the owners of the company and whether they see value in training their people. Often people will say, what if I train them and you leave? And you say, yeah, what if you do and what if you don't and they stay? And, a lot of...
That's very good.
Yeah, a lot of people are, I don't want to invest in these people. They might leave, but again, it depends on their mindset. So it's not really a revenue thing. I've worked with people that were solopreneurs, massage therapists, and then I've worked with companies that are in the tens of millions of dollars. So it really is back to that mindset of whether we invest in ourselves and in our people.
Is that around that growth orientated mindset that you feel is the difference?
Yeah, that's a great point. So if we're talking about Carol Dweck's the fixed and the growth mindset there, yeah, if they've got a growth mindset, then they're open to learning. Otherwise, if they've got the fixed mindset, then they're not interested and they want to blame all of the other circumstances. And initially, I sort of had two main avatars that I worked with, and one was what I called Fed Up Freddie, and he'd been in business at least 5 years, and he was just over it, and the weeds were growing, and he just was overwhelmed. And then the other one was Aspirational Andy, which is what I think you're referring to, Catherine, in terms of that growth mindset. And they really want to grow the company, grow their people, and be as good as they can be. I don't work so much these days with Fed Up Freddies because they don't have the time, they don't have the energy, and again, you tend to get a lot of excuses. And that's something that, in terms of people working with me, is I like people who are open and who are willing to take the feedback and take responsibility.
And when you're delivering your program, is there a favorite part or component of that program that you really like to just thrash out with your clients? And is there one area that's more interesting than the others for you?
Yes, I absolutely love teaching active listening. And because active listening is a real skill, it's demonstrating that you heard and understood the message. It doesn't mean that you necessarily agree with the message, but you want to demonstrate to the other person that you got it. Otherwise, people go round and round and round in circles, and often they just get louder and louder. And what we find is that generally the person who's got the problem is the best person to solve it, because they know all the reasons why your solution won't work. And in fact, one of my favorite diagrams that we put on a flip chart is, I start off with, people come in with this presenting problem. So we draw this circle, and then I put a line under this. So it's sort of like an oval, and I put a line under it. And I always make this disclaimer that I love men. I do. I think men are fantastic. They think a little differently to women. And what they want to do is, when we put this line under it, they just want to give you the solution. So, for example, say the wife is going to a networking event, and I'm sure that this is very relevant, and she says, I've got nothing to wear. And husband comes in and says, well, wear the red dress. And she goes, no, I can't wear the red dress. That makes my bum look big. And he goes, oh, well, wear the blue dress. And she says, I can't wear the blue dress. I wore that last time. And he says, well, wear the green dress. And she says, no, I can't wear the green dress because that's a cocktail event and this isn't one. And then he gets frustrated and says, well, go naked. And then but what we find is, if we use this skill of active listening and we come down from this circle and we get down to the bottom and we find out what the real issue is. And the real issue is that she's actually speaking at this networking event, and she's actually anxious and nervous about that, and it's not about the dress. And so for people to understand that people want to be heard, they want to be listened to, and they want to know that you've got what they're saying. And so there's very skills that you use in order to do that. And if I could teach everybody to just take the time to active listen to others, then the relationships both at home and at work, everywhere, would just that would just be amazing.
A great life skill. And I think sometimes, in my own experience, when I'm not in a good place and I'm busy and I'm stressed and everything, it's very easy to respond in a way that I wouldn't normally. And I feel like as though, I haven't listened and I've just reacted or responded. But then when I'm doing the work and I'm feeling good and, everything's on track and I'm managing my stress, I'm doing my exercise, whatever, then there is capacity to do that. So I guess it comes and goes for me a little bit, but hopefully, with practice, it's such a great life skill, isn't it?
It is. And you've just demonstrated there great self-awareness. So, when you're stressed and you're overwhelmed, that you're going to be a little bit short and you're not as present and you're not as tolerant. So that's self-awareness, because then you can manage yourself when you're like that. And I've gotten like that in the past. And I go to my husband, I'm not going out today because if I do, I'm going to upset somebody. So I'm just going to stay home today, because I've learned that the hard way.
It sounds like emotional intelligence and almost that sort of empathetic listening is a real key role in leadership as well as in our personal lives. Do you feel that really changes in a workplace environment when you have leaders who can show up like that? Sort of really changes how heard people feel and how appreciated they are?
Yeah, so there's a couple of points to that, Catherine. People want to feel appreciated. And if anybody's not read the book, I highly recommend it, is The 5 Love Languages by Gary Chapman, because it's the way that we want to be appreciated. So if your love language is, say, words of affirmation, and you like to be praised and appreciated and told, you've done a good job, but I give you gifts, here's a little bonus, here's a bunch of flowers, then we've got words of affirmation and gifts. It's like talking Chinese and English. You think you're appreciating someone, but you're not doing it in the right language. So this again is understanding ourselves and then understanding other people. And the other point to that is with that empathetic listening is Satya Nadella, who is the CEO for Microsoft. He came in around 2014. Microsoft wasn't doing very well at the time. They had this real competitive culture where people were assessed against their peers, and somebody always had to end up, if you think about a population curve, somebody always had to end up down on the poor performer spectrum. And so a lot of people left. They went to Google and they went to Amazon. And he came in and he had a disabled son, had cerebral palsy, and he encouraged all of his leaders to become more empathetic and to listen to their people. And because then you'll find out what's going on. And also you people feel then that you really care about them because you are listening to them and finding out what's going on. And that's he's just turned the whole thing around now just through that.
It's amazing.
And with your clients, Shirley, we have a goal with One Quest that we want people to do some work and improve their mental health, their wellness, their well-being, and hopefully that spreads throughout their community so that they can show up and be more present. And, the infection, it's infectious. So it just spreads that love and goodness, right? Do you find that your clients are having better lifestyles after doing your program because they've, got off that hamster wheel of just go, 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 go? Are they focusing more on work-life balance? What do you see in that space for your clients?
Yeah, we had a client came in one time to do the leadership experience, and his goal was to become a better business person and a better leader. And the outcome was he became a better husband and a better father. And we know that from a couple of different ways. One of his daughters said to him one time, months later, when you didn't used to be a real good dad. He's like, oh, wow. and then he would be working from home, and he'd be on his computer, and his wife would come in of an afternoon and she'd say, oh, hi, how are you? And he'd still be working and he'd be like, yeah, hi, and back, yeah, and he'd get really annoyed at this, and this would go on for about 30 minutes. And when he learnt to get present and active listen, she'd come in, he'd put the computer down, he'd turn around, how was your day? Oh, that's good, yep, nice. And then that would take 10 minutes. So he actually gained 20 minutes, and it actually improved the relationship, as you can imagine, because now the wife's not completing with that laptop, and and he's fully present. So yes, it does. These are life skills, Steph. So we talk about leadership and we call it leading yourself and leading others, because you really are leading yourself. And it might be at work, but it's also in the family as well. You use these skills all the time, totally transferable.
It's amazing. That's significant personal transformation right there. It's amazing how when you start having that, I guess that, like you said, the awareness, but around your own behavioral patterns and the things, the drivers that are there that are under the hood that you don't even know are there, when you can start kind of excavating some of that, how much that impacts everything and everyone around you. Like, it's not just your own mental clarity and your own I guess, emotional stability, but also the way you can show up for others is so different. It's amazing how much that's such a transferable skill. Do you find that there are practices that really help people to start, I guess from a self-care and a personal fulfillment standpoint, help them to start, finding their way to improve themselves? I guess not just
Yeah.
personally, but sort of then take that into the office.
Yeah, well, my clients coined this phrase, Shirleyfied. And so they'll talk about people who've learnt the skills and practicing the skills, and they'll introduce people and they'll say, oh, that person's okay. They've been Shirleyfied. And they go, oh, okay. It's this way of communicating and interacting. And we talk about being assertive, and the real definition of being assertive is being honest and congruent. And it's about understanding what your needs are and taking responsibility for getting them, but not at the expense of others. So we're looking for a real win-win. And in doing so, we use our communication skills and we take responsibility. And, one of the things that we help people with in terms of what you're asking there with self-care, one of the biggest things is learning to say no. And in fact, when I was working with Kip McGrath and I had this series of milestones to achieve over a couple of years, the very first thing I had to do was to learn to say no to the franchisees. And in fact, one Friday afternoon, it was about 4:45, and one of the franchisees was selling their franchise, and they were responsible for paying the training fee for the incoming franchisee. Now, they could have added that to the sale price or whatever, but anyway, this franchisee was complaining, well, I don't think I should have to pay for it, and we just put the price up. Anyway, I've gone into Kip's office and I've said, oh, this person's complaining, they don't want to pay for it and that. And he's leaned in and he said, Shirley, you know the answer to this. And I said, yes. And he says, why are we having this conversation? Say no. And it was because I wanted to be the good girl and make him out to be the baddie. And this is what we find with leaders as well, is that being able to say no is a real skill, and then it gives you that self-care. I had an opportunity today in between when I finished my last call and this call. Somebody said, oh, I've only got this amount of time, are you available? And I ummed and ahed about it, and I thought, no, I want to show up for this. I want to be fully present. I don't want to be running from one to the other. And so, saying no. And if anybody's interested, there's a great book called Essentialism by Greg McKeown, which is really, again, talk about self-care and also self-awareness. It's like what you say yes to, you're saying no to something else. And for many, many years, I've said yes to other things and other people, which meant I've been saying no to my husband. And in fact, one time he called me out on it. I used to have an office, and he'd ring up. He would come home about 4:00 in the afternoon, start to prepare dinner and stuff. And he'd ring up and he'd say, how long are you going to be? And I'd say, oh, half an hour. And 3 hours later, I'd rock in. And anyway, one day he said to me, I don't trust you. And I'm like, oh, what? And I'm thinking, I'm not having an affair. I haven't got time for that. And he said, you're not your word. He said, I don't care if you're going to be 3 hours, but tell me 3 hours. Don't say 30 minutes and then rock up 3 hours later. And honestly, it was like oh, goodness. And so, here's another way that you get that self-awareness is, oh my God, this is how I'm showing up. And when I'm saying yes to these other things, I'm saying no to him. And so, I was able to change that then and start to say, nope, I've given him my word. I said I'll be half an hour, and finished or not, I'm out the door.
And are you seeing any trends working with so many business owners and leaders? Are there any trends that you're seeing that are happening now more than what they were, say, 10 years ago? And as an example, we had one guest on as a podcast guest, and he was sharing how he's implementing wellness in the workplace, which just sounded really unique and not yet a common theme. And then another thing that I've noticed is that a lot more people are getting on board with Pledge 1%. They're giving philosophy as a business. And I think there's a little bit of a grey area of people having, some sort of responsible environmental impact statements, but they're not actually, Anyway, is there any themes that you're seeing with businesses that's happening?
Yeah, and it's called mental health. And since COVID, the idea of mental health has become really a topical issue. And there's a couple of different sides to the coin of that. On the one hand, yes, as employers, we need to be looking after our people. But the legislation now with the psychosocial risk assessment and things, I think sometimes that we're potentially teaching people to be helpless. We call it learned helplessness, because people aren't necessarily seeking ways to become well or cope with it, like what I imagine you do with your meditation and your the mindfulness and the exercise and things like that, so that we can take care of ourselves. But now there's a real trend on mental health. We can't give them too much work, we can't give them too little work, and so it's a real responsibility on the business owner and the leaders that it wasn't so overt.
Are you finding that there's more implementation of wellness practices that are coming into the workplace with more sort of structured times, or encouragement of staff to spend more time getting quiet, or being more active, or taking more regular breaks? Is that something you're noticing?
Again, Catherine, it depends on the mindset of the directors of the business. So some directors are all over it and do the wellness. And in fact, I think we have a common acquaintance, and I'm very familiar with a lot of the wellness practices that they implement, and they have a great team and a great culture. But then I'll have other clients who, I'm old school, Shirl, I'm old school, just do your work. And, so, it depends on the actual person, and then, whether you can influence them to show them that, well, I think it was Marriott who said, the Marriott brand of hotels, and that if you look after your people, they'll look after your customers. And so, really getting that across to people that the more you do look after your team and help them, then the better your business is.
Yeah, that's great. I attended a Atlassian social impact event a little while ago, and it was interesting to learn that there's businesses who are encouraging, say, up to 40 hours in their employment contract that they are to go and do some form of community work and get out and be involved in some way of giving back. I thought that was a really nice way to encourage people to start looking at what's their interests and what makes them feel better and things like that. So that's a slightly different workplace wellness program. And as a business owner yourself, what sort of practices do you have to, you run your business, you got things happening, and how do you take care of yourself?
Yeah, I like to do yoga, and I like to write in my journal, and I like to meditate. And I won't say I do that every day. That's the intent, though, because I find that I started going to the gym and my husband still goes to it. And I found, and this is just a personal thing because I like peace and quiet, and I found I'd come home more agitated after being at the gym because, that person didn't clean up and they sweated all over that and they didn't wipe it and the music's too loud and I couldn't get on the machine. And I thought, this is not doing me any good. And so I canned that, and now I get up and I, take my time and I just do my yoga, and he's gone to the gym and I'm all by myself. And in fact, I don't know whether it's because I'm an only child or an introvert or what, but I do need periods of solitude. And when we were living and travelling in the motorhome, and we'd been married for about 30 years, and in the first 30 days, it nearly did us in, it was because there was nowhere to go. And finally, I had to use my own skills and be assertive. And I said to him one day, I said, one of us has to go out today. I don't care if it's you or me, but I need space. So
that personal understanding is so important, because you can then have so much more authentic communication, and that really helps build trust, and really sort of promotes, I guess, just that like you said, that trust. Really, it's also being true to yourself, because one of the things that I loved before, where you were saying that your husband was saying, you're not being truthful with me. I think sometimes we're also not honest with ourselves, when we make promises, oh, I'm going to go to the gym tomorrow, or I'm going to get up at this time, and then we don't. And yet we would keep that promise to everybody else. Even in the workplace, we would keep that promise to other staff members, but then we fail to do that for ourselves, and to really show up for ourselves most of the time.
There's some great work by Gretchen Rubin, Gretchen, I think it is, Rubin, Rubin, and she has a quiz. You can do it for free online, and it's called The 4 Tendencies. And these are the tendencies of how we meet expectations. And so in these 4 tendencies, they're sort of 2 at the top and 2 at the side. And the one at the top is the upholder, and they will meet external expectations and they'll meet internal expectations. So if they say at New Year's Eve, I'm not smoking anymore, then they'll meet that internal expectation for themselves. And if they tell you they'll get it done at 3:00, they'll have it done for you. The obligers, though, is very most common, and that is they will meet external expectations, which is what you were saying then, Catherine, about I'll do it for you, but I won't do it for myself.
Yeah.
And then we have the rebel, and they won't meet expectations for anybody, external or internal. And then the questioner, they will meet internal expectations if they've had all of their questions answered. So it's worth doing. Just to, again, here's another way. You were asking earlier, Steph, about self-awareness activities, doing little quizzes and things like that to understand again, okay, yeah, that's true. Like, and I use it for myself now, again, to manage myself better. I will tell a client that I will have something to them by 3:00 on Friday. I might be up all night on Thursday doing it, but I said I would. And I think also with like accountability, it's who we give permission to hold us accountable. So I don't give my husband permission. Like, we're hopeless. I'll say to him, don't let me eat any chocolate tonight. And I'll go over to the chocolate bin. And he says, Shirl, you said no chocolate. And I just go, ha, 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 and I'm still getting into the chocolate. And then he'll say a second time, Shirl, you asked me not. And now he's got the look, and he goes, he doesn't ask a third time, as I'm having the chocolate, and then, resenting myself the next day for it. So again, when you understand yourself, and you understand who you'll allow to hold you accountable, then you can manage yourself a lot better.
I've done the 16 personalities one. That was really, really accurate, surprisingly accurate for me. Do you have a favorite or a group of personality or people type assessments that you like to use?
I do. And I think you're talking about the Myers-Briggs, whether you're introvert, extrovert, intuitive, or thinking, feeling, or practical, and that. And all of them, Steph, they're all very similar in terms of what they measure. And the one that I really like is the REACH ecosystem. And it's sort of REACH. RE is for our relational motivations, and ACH is for the achievement motivations. And the reason I like it, and it's sort of similar to the DISC profile in terms of, the different quadrants. However, what I like about the REACH ecosystem is that on your quadrant, you'll get a little dot for where you are, but then you get this arc around, and that's the reach, and that is the ability or the speed at which you can adapt to the other profiles. And the way that I like to explain it is that in these 4 quadrants, and so I need to explain the quadrant and then tell you how we sort of look at the reach. So you could ask somebody 2 questions and basically get an idea of their personality. So the first question is, when it comes to your day-to-day tasks, would you rather focus on people or tasks? And so that will put you either up the top as people or down the bottom as task. And then when it comes to achieving your goals, do you like to think about it and plan about it and be methodical about it? Or do you just go with your gut and get into action? And so that we then either have thinking or action. And so then if you sort of divide that quadrant, then we've got people who are people oriented, but they're thinking, they're counselors. And then we've got people that are task oriented and thinking, they're advisors. On the other side at the top, we've got people oriented but action, they're coaches. And then task oriented and action, they're drivers. And we need all of these on a team. Now, the 2 of them have got people in common, 2 of them have got tasks in common, 2 of them have got thinking in common, 2 of them have got action in common. But the ones that are diagonally opposite have absolutely nothing in common. So you can imagine how frustrating that is for people at work. Like a driver, their keyword is what? Come on, what's our result to be achieved? Diagonally opposite, the counsellor, who's who? Oh, we've got to have a social gathering. And, the driver says, oh, for God's sake, just get in and do your work. And the counsellor says, oh, they're so mean. They're not interested in what I've got to say. And so then with this reach, we look around at like, well, how quickly can you identify that other personality and adapt? And so if you were going overseas, for example, say wherever your dot is, that's Australia. We know the culture, we're comfortable here, we know how to get on and communicate. And then if we went overseas, if we went to Japan and France and Germany, most people would learn a little bit about the culture and learn a little bit of the language before they went so that they could have a better time. And yet we don't do that with the personalities. We don't take the time to understand, for the counsellor, I've got to sit down, I've got to have a cup of tea, I've got to talk about the grandkids, talk about how they met, etc., before I can get into the work. And with the driver, I don't do any of that. I just go, okay, let's go, press, sign here and press hard. And so I love it.
It's so clear that you know your stuff. And could you tell us a little bit more? The intro that we had for you was a shortened version. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you started and then worked through to then launch your business?
Yes. So when I first started, I was working as the COO for Kip McGrath Education Centres. I'd been there about 6 years, and a girlfriend of mine who's a HR lawyer said to me, would I come and document her procedures, because she was worried about getting an audit. And I said, sure. And as it happened, she was across the road. And so I'd finish my work and I'd walk across the road and I would start to document her procedures. And in the process of me asking her questions and stuff, and when we first started, I kid you not, she had 5 A4 pages of to-do list. Anyway, we put them into different time frames and stuff, and we changed ways that she did things, and we got her a day a month in extra time. And I thought, oh, wow, I love this. This is so interesting. I'm like real curious. How does all of this work? So I went and I asked my boss for part-time, and this was, I think, in the September. And he said, oh, well, when do you think that you might like to be in business for yourself on full time? And I said, I don't know, maybe, January next year or something like that. Totally naive. And he said, and what are you working on at the moment? And I said, this. And he said, how long do you think that'll take? And I said, about 3 weeks. He said, okay. Well, we finish up then. And I was like, so I found myself in business with no plan, no capital, and honestly no idea. And that was nearly 19 years ago. So that's how I started, Steph. And then the blueprint for business freedom came as the evolution of my business. So, that was process work, and then it became people work, and then it became the mindset work possibility. And these days I'm actually morphing also into helping female business owners to be more confident, have more self-belief and more confidence in being able to have those sales conversations. And because that's something that I'd struggled with for, many, many years. So
yeah, it's fascinating how much you've gone from one to the other, and those breadcrumbs have kind of continued to fall in front of you. Is there something that you're now sort of working towards learning and to extend your business more, or are you'd like to play in all of it? Because I find that kind of wanting to be a life student so fascinating in people, that some people just have that drive to always be learning and growing and evolving, and what can I do next and what can I learn next? Is there something that you're sort of feeling drawn to at the moment?
yes, absolutely. And that is helping the female entrepreneurs to have those sales skills, and to be able to look at their business model and the strategy. And I think, with the changes in the planet, the way things are going at the moment, you can look at all of your astrology and, all the different modalities are sort of pointing us to this, that there is this change. And I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity for people to be working for themselves. And there's a difference between being a great technician, but you've got to be able to sell it. And a lot of people, particularly in the service industries, and this is, I'm guilty of this myself, I would rather give it away than have that conversation. And so I'm really helping people now to be able to understand what's their business model, what's the strategy that they want, give them the skills, and then also the mindset, so that we're releasing those internal resistances and helping them to understand that, by having these conversations, in fact, what we say is that when people purchase something, the buying begins the breakthrough, because there's only so much you can get, information for free and do it by yourself. But the moment you commit and then you get more and more information and more help, then your breakthrough goes like up. So yeah, that's what I'm really excited about now, is the mindset, the strategy, and the skill set.
Do you feel that that's more around people struggling with, that I'm worth it, like putting that value on what they can bring forward? Or is it more just that they feel as though they don't have the skill set yet to ask for that amount of money? Because there's kind of two sort of frames of mind with that, isn't there, really? It's like, am I actually worth asking that amount of money, and do I have the ability to do that? Or I've only been doing it for so long, surely I can't ask that amount. Is that something that you think sort of plays into?
So there's a couple of things there. There's like the beliefs systems that we have there, and also the energetic match. So, you want to price yourself at something that you can consistently convert at. It's no good setting your price right up here and then finding that, you get one and then you don't get any and then you get another one. Whereas if you set your price at something that you can consistently convert at, well, then you can increase your price and then increase your price. But what we want is consistency of being able to advertise and market, have people interested in, and then you be able to help them with your paid programs. And then the other one is around these limiting beliefs and this self-worth. And, we talked earlier about the self-awareness through, and I've spent, crikey, it's well over $500,000 on personal development. And, if I'd put that in property, I'd be sitting on the beach in Hawaii drinking Mai Tais or something now. But, but that it's my passion, and we don't have children. So there's just my husband and myself, and we can travel all over the world and learn from the best and do all of that and distill it back. But one program I was in, I became aware that I had these limiting beliefs was, nobody wants what I've got to offer, and nobody wants to pay what I'm asking. So in effect, I was saying no before the customer. They won't want that. And so I'd find myself not advertising, or if I did and people had an inquiry, I discounted straight away. And so these are the things that I really want to help other women with now, because it holds you back, until you can get over that. And, you're really not going to make it if you don't get over that.
And is the approach with women something that you see is more needed than just a blanket approach for everyone? Because as we talk about these things, self-worth, self-belief, having the courage to put yourself out there, the ability to write down some, targets and goals and, manifestation work and all this, like, I think most people could benefit from this, but you're wanting to focus on women. Is there any particular reason why?
Yes, and I agree with you. Most people could relate to it and could benefit from the skills. The reason why is because I've been there. They say that we are our own best client, and so when you overcome something, you instantly have the copy, copywriting. You instantly have the copy that resonates with people because you know it. You've been there. You've done that, and so you can resonate with people. And I can say I get it. I've done this, and so that's why.
Yeah, it's your story. You've walked the path and you can share that with people. Yeah, absolutely. Makes sense.
It's fascinating hearing how you're putting that understanding that you have of yourself into practice. And I find the best coaches are the ones that have walked that path themselves. They just have so much information that they can impart that's inherent in them. They don't have to search for the answers, and they can really hold space for others. It's amazing that you do it just so beautifully. Yeah.
Thank you.
I love talking to you about all of the different areas that you are playing in, because it's such a comprehensive service that you offer, but also really meeting people where they're at. And I think that's such an amazing skill, to be able to come into a business and really see what people are doing and give them those action steps to help them really navigate what's in front of them and learn to trust their intuition more, as well as give them that education and skills. You must see some really beautiful transformations within businesses.
Yeah, absolutely. There's lots of transformations, and often people are doing things and they don't understand why they're doing it. And so again, if we come back to businesses, getting clear on their policies and their procedures and the way that they do things and why they do them. One company that I was with, for example, there was a letter. It was in real estate, and they would send this letter off to the solicitors when it was time for houses to settle. And I've read through the letter and I said, what is it that you actually want the solicitor to do here? Because I just couldn't see this, request for an action. And the person said, I don't know. This is the letter that we send. And I said, okay. How about we just ask the manager? So we called the manager over and said, we're just looking at this letter, and can you tell me what is it that we want the person to do? And they've read the letter, and then they've gone, God, the last paragraph's missing. And so somewhere along the line, somebody had deleted the last paragraph, but nobody registered. And so here was this now template of a letter going out that had this most important, and what we want you to do is. And so, helping people to understand why they're doing what they're doing, then they'll start thinking about, well, actually, that doesn't really make sense. So yeah. So, and look, transformations, I'm just buying myself a bit of time there while I think about them. We so transparent. I do have lots of testimonials on the website and that, but there was one in particular, again, in real estate, and this person, and he's on my website, Paul, he doesn't, mind us talking about it, but he was like stressed out, overwhelmed. He was responsible for bringing in 76% of the company's income. And anyway, what we did was helped him, and he'll tell you, at the age of, I think, 50, we started working together, and he would say, God, I didn't realize how much I didn't know. And he was then able to grow the team, and his responsibility for the income went down to about 5 or 6%. The team increased, and they were able to double their income as well. So other people have been able to go on extended holidays. That was their goal, and they thought, the business needs me, and they were able to go on a 6 or an 8 week holiday. And in fact, they sent a picture back. They were over in Ireland, standing underneath this thing called Dalton's Bar, and that was pretty cool. Yeah,
That's
other people
great.
have taken 6 months off and sailed around the Whitsundays. Other people, one of my best was Steve and Emma. Steve was stressed out, and he had a solar business in Bellingen, but him and his wife were sailors, and they really just wanted to sail around the Pacific initially and help people go off grid with their electricity. Anyway, they bought this boat, and I helped coach him through the decision to actually do it, because he will tell you he had 1,000 reasons why not. Bought this catamaran over in the Caribbean, and Ross and I had the best 3 days ever. It took us hours and hours to get there, and then we spent 3 days on the boat floating around with them around St. Lucia, and it was just amazing. And he's obviously sold the boat, and then his goal was to become an author, and he's written 2 books now. So yeah, amazing.
Yeah, that sounds like a nice story, that one. I'll happily subscribe to that one. If you can help me buy a boat in the Caribbean so I can go sailing for 6 months, you've got a new client.
Good.
Just be mindful of time, because I know you do have an important meeting on shortly. Before we wrap up, is there anything that you could share with our listeners? Something like a motto or a theme that you've really held true to, that's helped you stay focused, get to where you are, remember why you're waking up each day? Is there anything at all that you could share with our listeners before we wrap up?
Yeah, absolutely. So my favourite quote in the whole world comes from Herbert Spencer, who's an English philosopher. And because I'm so keen on learning, I can't help myself, learn, teach. His quote is, "The great aim of education is not knowledge, but action." And so, I have to remind myself, you've got to implement what you learn. Otherwise, you just walk around, I know. But, yeah.
Very true. Well, thank you so much, Shirley, for being a wonderful guest on our podcast. It's been really, really enjoyable listening to the services you offer your clients and hearing a bit about your story. I don't think we had the full deep dive that we would have liked to, but it's great to have had you here for any period of time.
Yeah, thanks so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Shirley.
And